is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalahungva. The Ho-Chunk Nation in Wisconsin will soon open one of its 3 casinos. New safety and sanitation plans will be in effect next week at Ho-Chunk Gaming in Madison. It's already a smoke-free casino. And there will be fewer slot machines to play, less than half. 400 out of 1,300 slot machines will be operating according to the nation. Only current player club members will be allowed into the facility during this initial phase of reopening. And guests will be required to wear a face covering and have their temperature taken when they enter the casino. There are a handful of tribally owned casinos that have already reopened. Some are going smoke-free. All are reducing the number of machines and increasing sanitation efforts. A judge rules in favor of the Shinnecock Nation in New York, so the tribe can keep its large electronic billboard for now. The state Supreme Court denied New York's request for a preliminary injunction to remove the billboard. The city has an ordinance banning such billboards, but this billboard is on tribal land. The judge also denied the tribe's request to dismiss the case. The billboard will remain in place on the Shinnecock Nation as the case progresses. The Shinnecock people's historical home is in the Hamptons, yet the tribe only gained federal recognition in 2010. Tribal officials say their efforts at economic development have been met with resistance from the locals. A proposed casino was rejected in a federal court lawsuit, while a tobacco ordinance passed and has become a revenue stream for the tribe. Ironically, the billboard in dispute is now being used by the tribe and the city to post updates on COVID-19. For the latest numbers of COVID-positive cases in Indian Country, let's go to Jordan Bennett-Begay, our Washington editor. Jordan?
Patty, Patty, there are 4 tribes who reported more positive cases within their community, while one Alaska Native tribal health clinic reported their first case. Here are the latest numbers according to our database. There are 5,889 positive confirmed cases and 178 deaths within the Indian health system. Again, that is a total of 5,889 positive confirmed cases and 178 deaths as of this morning. The Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma has a total of 103 positive cases. The tribe reported 5 more cases within their tribal jurisdiction. And in Arizona, the White Mountain Apache tribe reported 19 new cases, giving them a total of 449 cases overall. And the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians in Mississippi reported 5 new cases. They now have a total of 330 cases. And the Navajo Nation, which spans across Arizona and in parts of New Mexico and Utah, reported 82 additional cases and 2 more deaths. Tribal officials now say this gives the tribe a total of 4,153 cases overall. But they also reported that there are now 1,001 individuals who have recovered from the virus, Patty. And actually yesterday, the Maniloc Association or Northwest Alaska recorded their first positive COVID-19 case. The tribal health facility is located in Kotzebue, Alaska, which is approximately 26 miles above the Arctic Circle. And the facility serves 12 federally recognized tribes. And according to the Indian Health Service's 2006 data, the user population is about 7,630 people there. And in 2002, IHS counted 625 homes with water and water services, and sewer services, and 209 homes without. Right now, the state of Alaska has a total of 399 positive confirmed cases.
Wow. And so when you think about those remote Alaska Native villages that now have, like you said, Kotzebue has 1 positive case, you wonder how did it get in, because the only way to reach them is by airplane or on a dog sled, or because there are no roads into those communities.
No, that's exactly right. You also think about the hand washing too. If not, a lot of homes do have access to that, so they're trying to come up with other measures, or to keep washing their hands, or and they've already implemented a lot of measures before this first case happened too, like social distancing.
Right, and we are keeping an eye on the fishing season that's about to take place in the Bering Street area. Jordan Bennett-Begay, thank you so much.
Yeah, Patty.
And we'll be right back. Welcome back. Whoever thought we would be experiencing a pandemic? Just about no one was prepared for how life would change in a matter of days. Perhaps the most confused are the children. Try explaining to a 7-year-old why they can't go to school or go to their friend's home to play or even go to a park and play on the swings and the slides. Teenagers too are being told, no, you can't go out with your friends. So how do parents and caregivers manage? Joining us today is Darryltaneema. You may know him as a singer and an entertainer. He's also a psychologist. Welcome, Darryl.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We'll appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. And today you are the CEO of Taneema Consulting Group and also First Nations Telehealth Solutions. You have a deep background in health and education with 3 bachelors, a master's in education, and your doctorate in counseling. With your background and experience, were you prepared for this pandemic to help your patients?
Well, one of the things that I know about how stress and trauma behave, either if it's chronic, like the COVID, where this is kind of it's ongoing, or if it's acute, is that the body responds differently during stressful situations. It's the psychology is a big part of it, but the physiology is also a big part of it. And thankfully, I've spent the last 15 years learning about the physiology of trauma and how it behaves in the body, and then really simple tools that we can use to prevent this from building up in the system. What I want to have in 3 to 4 months from now is the spike in alcoholism, drugs, suicide attempts, and things like that. We want to make sure that we're releasing that over time. And that's kind of where we are in this season now. And thankfully, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of communities and a lot of schools to prepare for what we hope isn't coming, but could be coming.
And you talk a lot about how, you can teach people to change their behavior. So, this is really hard to deal with the pandemic. And then on top of that, trying to figure out how to change your behavior. What is your best advice for people dealing in this pandemic? And then also thinking about how do they change their behavior?
So first of all, don't make huge, big stroke behavior changes during this time. Keeping, just like when I would talk with folks about nutrition and weight gain around Christmas time, if you can keep it steady as she goes, that's a victory. So if we're looking at behavior change, look at what your baseline was before this even started. How did you feel beforehand? Have you noticed changes in you since this has happened? I know that the first week that we found out about COVID, and we're in New York, so that things were shut down, and I know I was staying up to like 2 a.m, which I haven't done since college, and then I was sleeping until like 10, which is unheard of, and so I had to kind of think, well, what is going on in my system that is keeping me kind of nudged? And so what the stress center, the autonomic system in the body just kind of gets a little activated during novelty, during something new, during something different. And so it kind of keeps you on edge. So before I even talk about big behavior change, I want to know, what does it feel like in you? And it may not be this big pounding, heart pounding, can't breathe thing. It may be, I'm sleeping longer. I have a little more edge to myself. Some of my eating habits have changed. I'm eating more medication type foods, a lot of chocolates, a lot of sweets, a lot of things like that. So nutrition change, and really those are things, really subtle things that you can still attend to while this is occurring. You can make sure you're getting enough nutrition out of proteins, probiotics in the system, drinking enough water, getting enough rest. These are simple things that you just attend to it. It'll help you with the battle against stress or any kind of depression.
And that's for the adults, the caregivers. Let's talk about the kids. What signs should parents look for when they're concerned about their kids? And maybe they're not saying I'm stressed. Maybe they're not saying that they're worried about life or anything like that. What are they saying?
That's an awesome question. So, and my first point of jumping in is we as parents really have to take care of ourselves because our kids are social referencing us. They're looking at us and saying, how do we behave in this season? Is this stressful because we're looking at us? And if we're stressed, if we're stressful eating, if we're angry, if we're having like the sleeping pattern problems, they're looking at that and saying, that's how this season is, and that's how they're going to behave. And kids always look to the adult. They look vertically more than they look horizontally to other kids about how should I behave in this moment. So the first thing we do, just like on an airplane, is you put your life mask on first. Is that what they call it? Life mask? Air mask.
Yeah, oxygen mask.
You put your oxygen mask on first, then put it on the child next to you. So make sure you're okay first, because that's going to determine a lot of how this goes for the kids. Second thing is kids may have difficulty expressing. They don't have the same verbal tools. Their brain is not a fully developed adult brain, so they may experience it but not be able to express it. So we can almost expect some behavioral problems, particularly if we hadn't worked with them to express initially, even before this occurred. If they don't have that skill set already, the behavioral problems may look like sleeplessness, and it may look like irritability, defiance, anger. That's just how their body's responding. It feels like that, and this is how it's expressed. My son when this first started, I was coming down here to do webinars and things, and that's when there was so much was unknown about it, that if you walked out of your house, it was dangerous. And he was hearing that on the news, and that was one of the things I had to change. We stopped watching as much news about it. And I was changing to get dressed to come here, and I get ready to walk out the front door, and all the pillows from the couch are stacked up against the front door. And he's standing behind me, and I turn around and say, "What's going on, Jack?" And he kind of sheepishly said, "I don't want you to go." He was 8 years old, and so I didn't go. I figured out a way to work from home, because the number one thing that will predict success for our kids is, do they feel safe during this time? Was home safe? Was I safe? In our communities, are we consistent? Are we there? Are we sober? Are we bringing them along? Those are the things that are going to determine how this goes for our kids. And I'm always recommending this now more than ever. I always recommend this, but now more than ever, parenting is not a spectator sport. But we have to dive in to our kids, so they have the opportunity to feel free and to express and to feel safe and comfortable. And parents know the baseline of their kids. You should know your kids well enough that any deviation, significant deviation from behavior, you kind of recognize that and engage the kids at that level.
Right. So we, at the beginning of this, meaning like back in mid-March, we interviewed a woman who had a lot of experience with education and special ed for children, and other educators as well, who said, keep your kids on a schedule at home. So all these parents who suddenly became teachers, homeschooling, were encouraged to still get their kids up at a set time every morning, and then go through the routine of getting dressed for school, having your breakfast, and then going to school, and maybe that's at your kitchen table. So they really stress that structure, and I don't know of any parent who's kept that up, honestly. Now we're going into the summertime when school would normally be let out, and we're still in this unknown where we're not even sure how school will look like come the fall. And so in the summertime, when kids are typically, that's their free-for-all time, there's no structure there. Do you recommend continuing to have some kind of structure for the kids?
I always recommend some structure for kids, for sure, because the child's brain, particularly if there's chaos in the home, it's so diffuse. And structure is something that helps the traumatized brain, the stressful home. Structure helps that. So I wouldn't say unplug all structure and just go for it. I would make sure that there is some relative structure. Like in our home, you kind of use the summers past as baseline. Just because this has occurred doesn't mean that we can't deviate so much from what we've done previously. So we have relative bedtimes, because the sun goes down at 10 here, and so we want to have some relative bedtimes. We want to have relative wake-up times, like you would in a normal summer. But remember that the child, it may not look like it, but the child requires structure, not overwhelming structure, but scaffolding. So scaffolding is how, this is the parameters in which you raise our kids, and it helps them. It doesn't hinder them. And sometimes they get mad about it, but I'm not here to be my kid's buddy. I'm here to be their daddy. They're going to have a bunch of buddies in their lifetime. They're going to have this daddy. So my role is to help them along, to nurture them. And I think that's a really big word, an important word during this time. And it's always been a big word in our communities, even traditionally. Nurturing was just to bring along in a good way, in the way our community and our homes or our traditions or our culture operate. Sort of nurturing them in a good way, bringing them along. I think now more than ever, that's an important word for our communities.
And that's nurturing on a very individual basis, because our tribes are so socially oriented, and our clanships play a huge role in that. But in this environment, we are not able to get together in those larger family structures. So it's nurturing on a one-to-one level.
Right. And diving into who the kids are, because it's not, we need a parent with a bunch of different paintbrushes. And the one I use for my daughter is going to be a different one than I use for my son. We have the overall themes of who we are as a family, but they have individual needs, individual temperaments. Some are social, some are introverts, and meeting them where they are. I think if we can do that, we can make a safer environment and have healthy outcomes at the end of this, rather than toxic outcomes.
You call this a watershed moment for parents and kids. What do you mean by that?
It can be a reset. We can determine who we are as individuals or who we are as families, finding a different meaning in this season, claiming the narrative for really. It could be overwhelming, it could be traumatic, or it could be learning. It could be a point where we grew together as a family, as individuals. I think it's important for us to kind of sit back and claim that narrative rather than have it be forced upon us, which has happened a lot historically. And I think now is an opportunity for you and your homes to say, here's what we're going to be about during the season, and then carry the things forward that are valuable, that you really want to carry forward. You don't have to carry everything forward that you've done previously. We've never had a pause like this in any of our lifetimes. So we can look at it and say, well, here's the things that I really learned. And here's who I was previously that I want to bring forward, but not everything has to come forward. Here's who I want to be from now on as a parent, as an individual.
And you talk about this idea of self-sovereignty. Do you have dogs?
You know what? The office next to me, he brings his dog to work.
Oh, that's nice.
And it might be about the size of a horse from what it sounds like.
Yeah. Well, isn't that fun? I mean, we all have our different noises that we're hearing, because we're working from home. And so working with all kinds of, I thought maybe you would introduce us to your dog. That's why I mentioned it.
I would introduce you to his dog, but I'm afraid he might carry me away. It sounds like a big dog through this wall right here.
Pretty big. I was starting to ask you about this idea of self-sovereignty. Tribes, certainly tribal leaders talk about sovereignty with our people, but you're talking about it as an individual. What do you mean by self-sovereignty?
So I think I do a lot of work in trauma and stress, and what trauma and stress do to the individual is it takes away their autonomy. It wants to be the boss. It wants to nudge you toward addictive behaviors, toward anger, toward limiting relationships. That's what it wants. Trauma's bottom line is to have you in your bedroom with lights off, under the covers, crying. That's what its bottom line is. And a sovereign moment is when we can claim that narrative and say, well, that's not what I want to be about anymore. And leaning into, maybe a little uncomfortable, the sensation base of what overwhelm is, and actually reclaiming that and saying, rather than trauma, I'm going to call it overwhelm, and it's stored in me. That takes away a lot of the scariness of it, because we've all felt overwhelmed at some point or other. And so what we want to do is recognize how it feels and become sovereign in that, and reclaiming ourselves, and then our homes, and then our families, and then our communities, and our reses. I think this is a good season for us to look at that and lean into it and say, how can we do this better? And so sovereignty trickles outward. I can't be sovereign. My community can't be sovereign if I can't do it in my own skin. So I think it starts with the first circle and then it spreads outward.
And how do you convey that to kids?
So kids, and blessedly, I get to do a lot of work with kids. And kids, they have trouble identifying what it feels like. The stuff that goes on at home. They may feel it's just the fast heart rate. It is the tingling in the arms. It is my breathing shallow. But in class, it looks like ADHD. It looks like oppositional problems. It looks like behavioral problems. And the first moment they get to feel different. So you can do activities, play games. There are certain physiological, somatic work you can do with kids, and they feel better. And then you connect that, say, this is possible for you. It doesn't, even though you may go home and have these struggles still at home, you can go to the bathroom or your bedroom or go outside and do these things and feel in charge of yourself again. And when I'm in charge of myself, that is a sovereign moment.
That sounds very powerful. I mean, when you put it into those terms here, we know about epigenetics and how trauma can live on in the cells. Is there any particular concern or awareness that you want to bring to the children who are being born during this time of pandemic?
Oh yeah, that's a huge conversation. There's a lot of, so epigenetic, the epi above the gene, the environmental influence on gene activation. There's a lot of research on how things that have happened historically, kids have been born with specific memories of those things. Some people with kids have been born stressed. In our Native communities, we've called that blood memory forever. It's been called blood memory, just that science has given it a fancy name in the past 10 years or so. And this is kind of an epigenetic moment. It's how are we handling the stress as individuals, as communities, as families? And we want to make sure, again, and then I keep coming back to this, but it is the crux, it's the bottom line, is safety and nurturing in our homes, in our communities. Not chaos, not anger, sobriety, consistency, nurturing. We want to affect future generations. Let's focus on what's going on right now in myself, and in my home, and in my community.
Interesting. And not all of us can play the flute. You do, but you use the flute as a way to practice breathing. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, I have my flute here with me. What a coincidence.
Okay.
So I wouldn't call myself a flautist, but I would call myself a flute player, a guy who plays flute. So there's a lot of research on breathing and how it affects CO2 exchange, how it affects the vagus nerve, how it affects midbrain function, the stress centers of the brain, and just a simple portable tool is just breathing. We know that breathing, a nasal breath, 3 counts in, and a pause, and a long exhale, like doing that about 6 to 7 times. So we breathe in about 12 to 14 cycles a minute. Getting it down to 6 to 7 cycles when we're feeling stressed actually can change this whole function in the system. And it's so easy, and it's not done like that. That's Lamaze breathing, and that's for a different time. And it's also not like this, because you're doing that, you're just trying to look skinny. So it's here in the abdomen, that breath, that is a relaxing breath, and it changes all this function, and it can help you lean into that moment where maybe your body feels a little out of control. And I call it flute breathing when I work with kids, because it's something they can relate to. So it looks like a 3 count in and a slow exhale. And I have them do it 6 to 7 times, and I have them exhale the whole time they're hearing a flute note. Because when I play flute, I don't blow. And like that, I breathe.
Darryl, that is a perfect way to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Everyone stay well, and let's take care of each other.
Uwi, Esquili, Katsi Ukalyani. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Tholahungva. Join us again tomorrow.
This is Indian Country Today.